Good afternoon. We've already issued several statements. I hope you have a copy or that they are distributing copies now, but maybe let me just start before the questions to establish some facts. First is that it is important to recognize that it is not the entire MNLF that moved in Zamboanga. That the forces there are those associated with Nur Miswari. We have, and this has come out already in media, that other senior MNLF leaders have spoken and said that we are not supportive of this. This is Miswari acting on his own. Among them was Mujahab Hashim, the head of the Islamic Command Council, Abdul Sarin, who is now currently heading the Joint Monitoring Committee, activated under the arm precisely to look at the welfare of MNLF communities. We have, of course, former Vice Mayor Muslimin Sema, who has said likewise, and there are others. And we have received, our officers received, even from Sulu, names of local commanders that have said we did not join Miswari. So I think it's important to establish that there are this is not the entire MNLF, and that MNLF has spoken openly that they think that continuing engagement with government is important. Second is to establish the fact as well that what is being put forward, that this is happening because we have ignored MNLF and even Miswari in moving the Southern Mindanao forward to sustainable peace and development is I would say a willful misunderstanding and misrepresentation of what is the reality. At the time that this administration came in, there was already a tripartite implementation review in place. This had been started in 2007. A lot of work had been done by the time this administration came in, and we continued with this process. We have, in fact, in 2011 held 2 meetings, one in Jeddah and one in Solo, Indonesia. In 2012 held a meeting in Bandung, and this year we are in fact scheduled to meet on Monday, the 16th. That just last week, precisely on Thursday and Friday, our facilitator from Indonesia, Ambassador Clabe, came to the Philippines, met with the GPH in Manila and with the MNLF, 2 groups of them in Davao, to tell us that we will be holding a meeting, that there will be a tripartite meeting in Yogyakarta. And as my understanding is, we said we were committed to join it, and that is up to yesterday when I met with Ambassador Legowo, is that the MNLF, the many parties there involved, have also confirmed to attend. This process has in fact had several products already, including consensus points on the amendment of RA 9054. That was the major agenda on the table, to amend 9054. And there were agreements on that, but which did not come to fruition because Miswari said, I still have some unresolved issues, but issues that in our mind and in the mind of many were clearly not in the purview of the implementation review. An implementation review is a review of the implementation of the 1996 peace agreement. It is not new negotiations. We are not looking at new terms. This process, to say that he has been ousted, I do not even talk about the many meetings that have been held here, the informal consultations, the memoranda of agreement that have been signed by various MNLF forces, including the group of Ms. last year with the armed government on the engagement in development, which he personally witnessed. So there have been many meetings, and up to last week rather, a memorandum of agreement was again signed by Governor Hataman and a group of senior MNLF leaders, which I understand include some leaders that are associated with Miswari. The third point to clarify is that it has been said that we have abrogated the 1996 final peace agreement. This is not true. What we have proposed to the OIC through our Indonesian facilitator is that we have said that considering how much work has been done already in the review process, considering the many ways forward that have been identified, we are proposing the completion of the review process. And this is very clear in the letter that was sent to the OIC Secretary General by the Indonesian facilitator, with our explaining our position, that the government clearly committed to continue to engage with the MNLF in moving forward towards a peaceful settlement of the problem in southern Philippines, even in the face of the completion of the implementation review. We were saying it is time to complete a 6-year review process is certainly sufficient to have identified what was done, what was not done, and we have ways of moving forward that is both on the development track and the political track. I will not go into those details now. So again, just to that even in our completing, we wanted this to be done in a way that came to would be done by the parties together, and that is why there is that meeting that is still scheduled in Yogyakarta next week. And finally, the framework agreement with the Bangsamoro, we have always said, is an inclusive process. I think I hope you have received also the statements that were made by both chairs in the talks that are now ongoing in Kuala Lumpur between GPH and the MILF. I hope you have received also a copy of their joint statement. The crafting of a new Bangsamoro law is not an exercise just for the MILF. It is not just an exercise for those who have fought. It is in fact an exercise that seeks to respond and address the aspirations of the entire Bangsamoro. And I put it on record that I had invited, both directly and through our Indonesian facilitator, we had invited Mr. Miswari and then Vice Mayor Sema to submit nominations for the Transition Commission, because as early as possible, we had wanted them formally to be in this process. Both of them declined. Nevertheless, we have spoken with members, particularly starting with the GPH members in the Transition Commission, to ensure that the legislative agenda of the MNLF, which has produced 42 consensus points on the amendment of RA 94, be seriously considered. And they will be taking this agenda in their meeting next October to find mechanisms and ways to ensure that the MNLF voice is heard in this process of crafting a new law for the Bangsamoro. And we can say that in looking forward towards the transition authority, certainly it is to be an inclusive process, and we can ensure that there will be representation there as well. There are other things to say about the engagement in terms of development, but I will stop at this point and take questions.
Okay, ma'am, your first question will come from Joyce Pañares of the Manila Standard.
Are we still pushing through with the Yogyakarta meeting next week?
That's what I understand from, we clarified that with the Indonesian embassy yesterday. They told me that the different personalities that have been invited have been identified. In these meetings, we are applying what has been called the Jeddah formula, which is a meeting that was held in Jeddah very, very early, where there was representation from the different wings of the MNLF. And when we first sat down, we said, please, because before we sat down, we had heard that what's happening in meetings is that they would fight over who sat. They would actually compete for chairs to be able to sit. And we said, we don't want that problem. How do we know who do we sit with? And he said this will reflect the Jeddah formula. So invitations have been put out in that light. We know that that the MNLF, through their different conduits, have requested for assistance to facilitate travel to Yogyakarta, and definitely the government, even though at the time that this meeting was talked about, we already knew that there was movement towards that, some reports of a declaration of independence, just because we thought this was important, that this matter be settled well, that it be settled in front of all the parties. We had agreed to go, and we are still committed to go.
Have you received word if the faction of Normiswari will be attending, sending a representative?
My understanding is they have requested for travel papers for Ms. Wari and 2 others.
And you've also mentioned that the group of SEMA and
Yes.
the other one, they have spoken out against what's happening in Zamboanga. Have they made any commitment to help the AFP to quell whatever is being launched in Zamboanga? And what's the impact of the activation of the Joint Monitoring Committee in ending this
No, the Joint
standoff?
Monitoring Committee that was activated by the ARM last year, no, in fact, 2 years ago, shortly after the OIC government was put into place, was not about monitoring arms. It was monitoring of development. It was a mechanism that was there already. So Governor Hataman, instead of creating a new body, decided just to activate a body that was there, and it has been working on identifying communities for development projects. So that is what that is. Yeah, in terms of commitments to help solve this problem, we understand statements that were made by Kong Sarin, for example, that he thinks that there are ways of moving forward. They understand that there have been gains made in the implementation in the implementation review process, and so our understanding is they are willing to travel that road with us.
Joyce?
Last na lang. Ma'am, how are we supposed to interpret Ms. Wari's presence in Yogyakarta and what they're claiming now, that the government is abrogating that they're against the ending of the tripartite review process?
Well, certainly we see in what happened between their meeting with the Indonesia last Friday and the action that was taken on Monday, that there is a big disconnect here and a possibility, and in fact I would look at it as a violation of the spirit of what we had discussed with Indonesia just last week, that there would be this meeting where there would peacefully be a laying out of positions and facts by the 2 parties, after which the Peace Committee on Southern Philippines, which is created by the OIC to look into the situation of Muslims in Southern Philippines, would meet and make a decision. So the Indonesians, I am assured, they have assured me, presented this process very clearly to the MNLF, sorry, and that there was agreement that they would participate. And so the action on Monday is hard to interpret within this scheme of things, except that it is a violation of what one has said on the table, that in fact a tripartite meeting was the process that would address these problems.
Celerina Monte?
Good afternoon, ma'am. Ma'am, yesterday the president said that there was no enough evidence to prove that Mr. Miswari was behind this siege. But now OPAPP, and even last night there was this joint statement by GPH and MILF saying that it's the Miswari's group. So with that statement, don't you think it's now time to file any charges against Miswari?
Well, we know that that assignment has been given to DOJ. And that is why all of his actions since the time that there was a discussion, when there was an initial attempt earlier to do a march in Zamboanga, you would know all of that his actions and the statements of his spokespersons have been closely monitored. So I know that there is already a group in the OJ that is looking into this. I think what we know as a fact is that those who are claiming to be spokespersons for what is happening in Zamboanga are certainly persons not only associated but have been sent by Ms. Wari as representatives, as his representatives to various meetings, including the meeting that was held with Indonesia. We know that for a fact that the one who has been identified to be a major commander in Zamboanga, Ustad Sabir Malik, is known to be a Ms. Wari loyalist.
Does the government have any information if Mr. is still in the Philippines?
I think we are quite sure he is still in the Philippines. I think there is some discussion whether he is in Sulu or in Basilan. But I have no first-hand knowledge of that. I just received reports.
Ma'am, we have communicated with the Indonesian embassy regarding what has been happening in Zamboanga. Was there any response already from Indonesia?
Well, immediately on Monday morning, I called the Indonesian ambassador because at that time, what was being aired by the one who was speaking for what was happening there in Zamboanga was that they wanted an activation of the ceasefire mechanism by Indonesia. And I called to check, is there such a ceasefire mechanism? And we both agreed this was not. The implementation review process has no ceasefire mechanism because it is reviewing a process that has already produced a law that is being followed in the land, which is Republic Act 1954. It was never envisioned that there would be a return to violence, so there is no ceasefire mechanism that is in place. So that was where it was. We had further discussion. We had a further exchange last night on what was the status of the Yogyakarta meeting. And what we were told is that as long as the Philippine government is willing to hold this, it is your proposal that is on the table, then it pushes through. But today, because the messages we are receiving from Zamboanga is that the message is that the only one that can resolve this is Ms. Wari, and that the mechanism that is being pushed around, that is being aired as a possible mechanism to understand just what is going on is the OIC. Then we have requested Indonesia. We have placed our request with Indonesia to let us know if there are, in fact, communications lines with Mr. Miswari. We are still awaiting. We understand that the Indonesian embassy here is seeking guidance from Jakarta.
Ma'am, last question from my end. In the opening statement of Professor Ferrer, she mentioned that one of the directives of the President is to come up with a legal framework with regard to the agreement with the MILF. Is it because to avoid similar incident to what is happening right now in Mindanao?
No, it is because the logic of the roadmap with the MILF is that it will go through a legal process. It will produce, that the new Bangsamoro will be put in place through a law. So therefore, whether this had happened or not, we will need a legal framework that will be clearly accepted by the Congress, that is a legislative body.
Weng de la Fuente of Net 25.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Ma'am, just a clarification. How do we regard now the situation in Zamboanga? Are we treating it as just yung criminal actions, or are we treating it as may political demand po kasi yung grupo?
If there is a political demand, will you please clarify what is the political demand right now? Independence?
Yes.
Well, then that is covered by a regime of legal laws as far as I know. The MNLF has consistently said, even though all the factions of them Even at the time when there was already this reported declaration of independence, that they were abiding by the 1996 final peace agreement. They wanted a full implementation of the final peace agreement of 1996. Again, we assert there is not any word in the 1996 final peace agreement that talks about independence. The political settlement was about autonomy. So when you jump from this to independence, then there are a lot of conflicting statements. It is abiding by the 1996 final peace agreement, and then independence. And when you look at what that independence statement is, and this was reiterated, has been reiterated several times, it is independence not just of the Bangsamoro territory that has already been fairly understood what that is. It is an independence of the entire. I think one will have to look at that. Certainly, an assertion of independence will need the support of all the people that are so covered.
Ma'am, have we belittled Ms. Wari because of yung mga sinasabi na nga po niya before na parang wag niyo kong baliwalain, and then there's this declaration of independence, and yung ang nangyari na po sa Zamboanga ngayon, hindi ba natin parang na minaliit na lang yung puwersa niya before kaya nagkaganyan?
Hindi, ayun nga yung realidad, hindi natin siya binaliwala. Walang panel for the MNLF, ako mismo yung nauupo. In our meetings that we held under the tripartite implementation review, under the Aquino administration, it was very high level officials that went. I brought other secretaries, I brought undersecretaries. We were represented from the Departments of Justice, the Office of the Presidential the Political Advisor. We would be even the deputy of the Security Council, the Deputy National Security Advisor would be there. When you look at the pattern of what we have done, when you look at the meetings that we have held, and I will talk about the Bandung meeting, where we waited for 6 hours after the technical working group had completed the language for the issue on plebiscite. Waited for 6 hours for Mr. Miswari to come out, and he turned down that very proposal that had been approved by his representatives in the technical working group. No, I will deny that we have not given full recognition to Mr. Miswari and the MNLF.
Ma'am, is the government considering tapping other sources or yung personalities that can get through with Mr. Miswari?
I think that has been going on since the time that and even before. You know, when Governor Hataman signed a memorandum of agreement, which was signed by his representative, and we know he is his representative because he has accompanied Mr. Miswari in the tripartite meetings. Attorney Bong Parcasio signed it, and Miswari was there. This was part of this attempt to bring him into this process of working together with other Bangsamoro leaders to bring about a final peace and development for southern Philippines, for Muslim Mindanao. It is, you know, what the MNLF, a major agenda they had put forward was they wanted an amendment of 1954. 42 consensus points were, are you ready for a quite long story? Do I have permission? Yeah. There were 42 consensus points, and as early as December 2010, we were ready to have this filed in Congress. Ms. Wari said no because I have 3 more unresolved issues. What were these? One was on the sharing of revenues from natural resources. We said this was outside of the purview of the implementation review because in fact you will not find that in the 1996 final peace agreement. Even there is a longer story to this, but to cut it short, we found a language, a formula, management of natural resources in the autonomous region that they accepted. So that was settled. But there were 2 more outstanding issues. What were these? One was that he wanted government to commit to a establishment of a provisional government for the MNLF. Again, we said that is out of the implementation review process, because if you look at the 1996 final peace agreement, it does not talk about a provisional government. What it says is that there will be established a transitional mechanism. That is the SPCPD. Those of you who are old enough will remember that this was set up under President Aquino. This is the Southern Philippines Council for Peace and Development, covering all the 13 provinces for development and peace. This was set up, he chaired it, Mr. Miswari chaired this, and the majority of the members in the SPCPD came from the MNLF. He was chair of the SPCPD even while he was governor of the ARM. He won as governor because he was the administration candidate. He served for 4 or 5 years. And then after that, there was an OIC under Isnaji Alvarez Isnaji, who is also MNLF, and then Parukusin was elected also as the administration candidate. So all in all, 10 years, MNLF has had the chance to lead the ARM for 10 years. So our response to this issue is that first, there was no such commitment in 1996 agreement for a provisional government, and second, how can you put up a provisional government now when in fact the MNLF has been served as governor for all of 10 years, and that there are now regular elections in the ARM. That was one issue. And the second issue is that he wanted an expansion of the territory, so that we wanted us to commit that a plebiscite would be held in all 13 provinces under the 1976 peace agreement. Let me make this clear. The 1996 peace agreement says that this completes the 1976 Tripoli agreement. Therefore, the reference point is 1996, no longer 1976. And as committed in the 1996, there would be the passage of an enhanced autonomy law, and that came out as Republic Act 1954. A plebiscite was then held on all 13 provinces. And the result is what we have now, 5 provinces and 1 city. So he wanted us to commit to another plebiscite for all 13 provinces. What we said was, that has been done. Twice already has there been a plebiscite in these areas. And we said, we offered a language that in case of the amendment of the law or the passage of a new law on autonomy, the Constitution itself says that there will be a plebiscite. So there will be a plebiscite. The area of coverage will be determined by Congress, and we can commit that there will be sufficient time for information and a campaign to vote to be part of the autonomous region. But we could not commit that all 13 provinces would be covered, because we were also already hearing from some areas, for example, Zamboanga City and Palawan, that you have already asked us twice, and we have already said no twice. Why are you going to submit us again to this process? And so these are the issues that Ms. Wari maintains are unresolved issues. And we have told the OIC, as far as we are concerned, these issues cannot be resolved. These issues cannot be resolved through the implementation review. But since government has agreed that there may be a new law, that there will be a new law to craft a new Bangsamoro political entity, then there will be a plebiscite there will be a transitional arrangement there, and we will commit that the MNLF can be part of this if they so choose.
Ma'am, one last na lang po. Are we considering tapping former President Ramos to speak to Ms. Wari?
I think all those who have been offering to help are being explored, but of course we are taking note first of those that we are hearing from the other side. I was just listening on television, and one of the spokespersons said that in fact there is no acceptable mediator and facilitator. But certainly we welcome anyone who can help to find exactly what it is that what is wanting, what is the solution forward to end the stalemate in Zamboanga.
Bombo Raymond Tinasa?
Ma'am, siguro ang pinaka-concern ng mga naiipit ngayong apektado nito ay kung paano sila kakain at kung paano bumalik yung normal nilang buhay, minus siguro yung kung ano yung mga political agenda dito. So how do we plan to end para malapatan natin yung pinaka-primary concern ng mga mamayan na hindi naman kasama dito sa gulong ito dapat?
There is a team on the ground. Right now, there are 3 secretaries on the ground. Secretary Volts Gasmin, Secretary Marojas, and Secretary Dinky Soliman just flew there this morning to look precisely at this, to take care. The primary concern of government is the protection of the civilians. We are very concerned about those who are seem to not have the freedom of movement to leave the places. There is a continuing search for those who may be able to bridge. I understand that message sent, and we have been receiving, and that the Zamboanga City Command, the consolidated command there, has not received any proposals from the other side for actions that can be taken to end the stalemate. We have listened to what has been expressed by some of the Zamboanga constituents that may be the OIC, that process can be put into place. This was not immediately used because in the mind of Indonesia, from the many times we have spoken to them, they are very clear about their role. They are facilitators of a review process, and that declarations of independence was outside the purview of the 1996 final peace agreement. But nevertheless, having heard this message, as I told you already, we have sent a message to Indonesia if there is something that they can do. At the same time, we know that our people on the ground, and there are several, have been trying to reach different leaders that are known to be associated to Miswari to find something that shows that they have some idea of how this would end.
So, but as we speak, wala pang direct contact kay Nur Miswari at wala pang formal negotiations on how to end this peacefully. Kasi as we heard from the President himself yesterday, overwhelming yung government forces, elite forces, and it could be read as yung option is through military operations.
No, I think the volume of military there is to make sure that it is contained. You know, if the government's position was a military position, then we would have seen that yesterday. The government is very conscious of the civilians that are going to be affected.
So for the record, military option or military operation is not an option.
It is an offensive option. It is an option for. It is definitely for containment.
Thank you.
Ina Andolong of Solar News.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
For containment and protection of civilians. Let me say that. So if there are actions that endanger civilians, certainly our military
Good afternoon, ma'am. Ma'am, you
and
mentioned
police. Yeah.
that the 1996 peace deal did not mention any independence, and that apparently Mr. Miswari is also asking for more things that are not included in the final peace deal. So does this mean, or are you saying that it's actually him who's going against what have been agreed upon?
Certainly from, yes. The implementation review does not present a platform for new items to be put on the table, and certainly any negotiations will not allow that the agreement will be for a division or a partitioning of the area. I would like to say and put on record that, as I have already done earlier when I issued a statement after my last meeting with the Foreign Minister Natalagawa of Indonesia, that Indonesia opposes any threat to the territorial integrity of the Philippines.
Ma'am, and another one. Despite the many factions in the MNLF, who is to be considered as the of the organization now, at least for the government who's in charge?
As I explained, in fact, that has been one of the problems in this implementation review, because you hear different statements from both of them, not both, but from many of them. And we have always, what we have asked is that Indonesia assure that it is not just one voice, one face that is represented there. And so there have been, as I said this, I think there is no question that the MNLF now has several leaders, none of whom can claim the loyalty of all. More than, we know about Vice Mayor Sema, we know former Vice Mayor Sema, we know about Ms. Wari, of course. Mujahab Hashim claims a group. There was the MNLF reform movement. There are others that are slightly related. I think at the time when I first sat in this position, there were 6 of them, and that many times all agreeable to sitting down with government, but not agreeable to sitting down by themselves. I think by now maybe you will say there may be 4 distinct formations, but also that there are many communities who just want peace and development. And that there are many communities, because we have a Pamana program that has been working with MNLF communities since 2011, whose call has been, and this was in fact specifically articulated by the president of the Bangsamoro, the Federation of Bangsamoro Women's Cooperatives during our meeting in Jeddah, that the call was for a unity among their leaders because the people have suffered enough. These are the communities that we have tried to listen to first and foremost, even as we had difficulties dealing with leadership that often did not have one voice. And in the end, I think that is what we will have to look at. It is the needs of our people. And so what has happened in Zamboanga is particularly bitter and disappointing, because we know that many of the communities that are now under grave threat are poor communities, and that some of the casualties, the first casualties, were in fact Muslim working people.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Last 2 questions, TJ Burgonyo and then Salima.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, given your dealings with the Ms. Wari and your efforts to bring him into the peace process, what exactly does he want this time?
I think that's the question, but let me just say that throughout this period of 3 years where we have engaged in long meetings, in long discussions, what was always coming out was that when we would find a formula or language on which technical level there would be some understanding, Ms. Wari would come in and say no. Let me say that after the solo meeting in late 2011, that we came out with a very good joint statement, which among other things agreed on installing a partnership on armed reform governance. This was just before the President appointed the OIC government under Governor Hataman. And we thought, well, we have a good plan, because they said that this could in fact be a way of completing the implementation of the final peace agreement. 2 to 3 weeks later, he went to Djibouti to the meeting of the foreign ministers meeting of the OIC, and condemned and said that nothing had been done, and called the government treacherous. That is the pattern of how these talks have been. We think we have some formula for working together, and always he will come out and say no. I already discussed about that very many hours that was spent on finding a acceptable language that will address their concerns about a plebiscite. And after his representative said yes in the technical committee, he said no, we cannot sign it. I do not want to openly speculate about what is in his mind, although I have enough evidences from what even some of their people have openly stated to me about what he wanted. But this pattern, I hope, should be looked at. This pattern of behavior on the table should be looked at. It will make Ms. Wari happy. It appears that all our work with all the different factions and all our work with the MNLF communities does not seem to make Ms. Wari happy. Therefore, what does he want? I will not. It is not my role to present what is his plan and what is his vision.
Ma'am, yesterday po, ma'am, hi. Salima Refran po, GMA7. Ma'am, yesterday sabi po ni Presidente Aquino na Chairman Miswari seems unsatisfied nga po, as you have said that, na sa pakiwari po ng Pangulo, personally, kung hindi po magiging pinuno ng kahit na ano po mangyayari sa ARMM si Miswari, parang he will never be satisfied nga po. Do you share the same sentiment, ma'am?
I said that that's not my role, but Kong Sarin, Mr. Abdul Sarin, who heads the, who is a recognized leader, they know him. He was one of those who fought. Said in his statement that this is about power.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
May I just say one last thing? We should not be surprised when there are incidents like this as we approach the end of a peace process. Because peace processes come up with agreements that change, that introduces changes, and some people will not like that. In all the peace processes, you will find it is not unusual that there is an outbreak of violence or some violent disturbance. What is important is not that these things happen or do not happen, but how we stand up to it. And this government's position is that we stand by the peace process, that we are moving forward, and we will complete the peace process for Southern Philippines. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Secretary Quintos-Deles.